afraid that I'm back into English now. Great, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is really just a quick review of maybe 20 minutes or 25 minutes of sort of the last 25 years, within 25 minutes, or within my allocated 30 minutes, with the 5 minutes questions, of really, you know, the trends and issues, at least as I see them. So basically, we started around, you know, the definition of sustainable development emerged particularly after Brundtland in 1987, and then we were there in Rio in 1992, where there was no discussion over climate change, resource efficiency, or innovation. I know because I was there. But what we've now had is the emergence of the new Sustainable Development Goals, 2030, where we have climate change and also, interestingly, innovation highlighted in there. We don't, interestingly, have resource efficiency or circular economy highlighted, but maybe that's tucked away under various boxes there. Let's hope so, at least anyway. Climate change really, I mean, is a surprising thing that really the issues really only started to emerge in public discussion and in the media in really late 90s, early 2000s. And really they took over a lot of the discussion in the 2000s. And then we had another critical moment when the IPCC, the sort of union of scientists around the world, really said climate change is happening. So that sent out a critical message. Then the next, you know, progression, of course, was the Paris Summit. And now, last week, 175 countries signing the agreement. The next stage is national ratification. So again, we think we're not getting moved. We have got, you know, some small progress on these things. And also, importantly, key networks were engaging in countries. The Pope stood up there, saying this is an important issue. It is one of the most, Catholics are one of the most powerful networks in the world. So that is important. He did not come out with major statements in Rio in 1992. Of course, now we have the Chinese and the Americans now engaging in the discussions. And I personally view that maybe we may see Obama setting up some sort of foundation to do with climate change in Africa. It's become very obvious his concerns around the issues, etc., etc. But also, around about 2008, I've not been able to put my finger on it, maybe there's people in the room who couldn't put their finger on it, we saw the whole issue of resource efficiency starting to get much more attention, particularly after the global meltdown in 2008. We saw all sorts of concerns around access to critical metals. We then saw, you know, emerging this broader discussion around moving away from the so-called take-make-waste economy. Already we had the Japanese, and to some extent the Germans, already progressing the thinking in their economies under resource efficiency or productivity for a long time. For a long time. But we saw, perhaps more broadly in Europe, the whole concept of this idea of moving away from the circular economy, the linear economy, to a more circular approach, starting to emerge, you know, 2010, 2011. I can't quite put my finger on it. We've seen various drivers, including the importance of various foundations and others who've added to the debate, and various, influential documents emerging. We had the original Cradle to Cradle book published in the early 2000s, but that really didn't catch light, really. It was the second publication, again around about 2008, that really took off. We'd had books previously in the 90s, Factor 4, and we'd had even the Factor 10 and 20 groups, you know, some level of influence, but, you know, not the level of discussion we're now seeing, in my personal opinion. And of course, as many of us will know here, December the 4th, we saw the final circular economy package, you know, plop out of the European Commission. And already the interesting point there is, you know, around the SDGs and even on the Paris Agreement, it's still quite macro level discussion. But out of the circular economy package, we're already seeing work started in standardization. Sen has already started work around reuse of components and also along life products, which I know France passed a law last March 2015 around providing better information on the lifetime of products. We in the UK have also started work on standardization. In November there will be a standard emerging for public consultation around the principles and framework for implementing a circular economy in organisations. This is slated then to be published next year. I know because I'm part of the team writing it, or having, let's say, the challenge of writing it. And actually thinking about the practicalities of what you need to do from a company that may be in a not so organised manner managing its waste, through to a significant shift towards circular economy thinking. There's a big shift in practice, despite what some of the think tanks are saying at the moment. And again, I'm going to go a bit backwards and forwards here. The late 90s, early 2000s, we saw a lot of work at a European Commission level around integrated product policy, looking at how we would green the demand side and the supply side. And that included work on eco-design. And in parallel to that, we saw a lot of work in Japan on this. They didn't call it integrated product policy, but they had a system in place to green demand and supply side. And around 2003 or something, I was part of a sort of group going around looking at what the Japanese were doing on eco-design in their manufacturing companies. It wasn't particularly radical, but it was much more permeated into the companies. Now what we saw, as often we see in policy terms, is, as we say in English, I don't know if you have it in French, a rearrangement of the deck chairs to some extent. We saw a lot of the elements of IPP ended up in sustainable consumption and production. And we've seen this reflected now in the changing job titles in the Commission and other national governments, and even now green growth, etc., etc. So things go in waves. And we saw also at a high level there in Rio, the Rio +20, we saw the 10-year plans being set. And initially, when the IPP discussions were happening in the late 90s in the Commission, the politicians didn't want to touch the demand side, the consumption side. But we've seen growing work around green procurement, particularly also at a local level. And I'm really interested in how we create the markets for the products. That's the, you know, as much as anything, we can create the products, but where are the markets? How do we construct them? And what needs to happen for those markets to be created? The Japanese have a green purchasing network that has been running maybe for 15-something years with major players, and it's part of their deliberate strategy to grow the market, to pull through the products for export. So the Japanese approach is all about competitive advantage of Japan, and it's you know, it's orchestrated, but in a different manner. So, you know, over the last 20 to 25 years, you know, what is one of the the key numbers that come in? You know, it's still actually very difficult to find the source of this figure, but you know, claims 80% of products' environmental impact is determined at the design stage. If you're not thinking about these issues in the beginning of the process, you're embedding the problems. Still, we see in many industrial design courses or design engineering courses, this is not being taught, sadly, and it's important it is. So, you know, this issue, we embed the problems. So we have to think proactively about designing for disassembly, for energy efficiency, right in those earlier stages. Even in the ideation, the creativity phase, we need to be introducing this. And many of the advanced companies are already doing this. What we also learned, again, over the last 20, 25 years is, you know, no longer just about physical products. It's about combinations of physical products with services. And maybe this concept of product service system. So it's also the infrastructure behind the products and the services. So if you're looking at the service dimension of this, this gets even more complicated. But services are still significant proportions of economies. So if we're not looking at that service element, we're missing a whole series of discussion. I'd say also, there is more, conversation around the idea of the life cycle. So the idea of, that each product has a life cycle, and then in classical eco-design terms, we're looking to reduce, we're looking to integrate looking to reduce environmental impact throughout the whole life cycle of the product in an integrated manner. But still, many companies, and I was training in Asia about 2 years ago, when I asked them, this is business-to-business companies, I was asking them, about the life cycle of the product. 19 out of 20 companies had no idea what happened to their products at the end of life. And that will be true for many B2B companies, even in Europe, because they're selling into the chain. They're delivering that, others add a badge to it, whatever. So throughout maybe the 2000s, we saw elements of eco-design getting more, incorporated. But this is generally around energy, and this is where we saw, so it's about reducing energy. We saw even eco-design directive reframed as the energy using products directive, reframed further as the energy related products directive, focused on energy. But I think what we're going to see more of out of the circular economy package, and also what other national countries are now starting to do, including France, I believe, is potential retrofitting of that legislation now to start to incorporate some form of targets. What those will be. Commission doesn't want anything on resource efficiency targets, but maybe we'll start to see some metrics around disassembly of products or something like this. I believe something will come. So what do I see over the last sort of 20 years or so? So I see a light greening of products, a light greening of product development. We've seen major companies like Philips develop their own, and that's just an example. Many other companies have developed their own approaches to manage eco-design. I haven't got time to go into the details, and to start to quantify the environmental impacts, both from a financial and environmental point of view. But again, what we're seeing now is a number of also those leadership companies starting to now think about what circular economy means to them. And companies like, for example, Interface Floor, they've started to develop products using bio-based nylon. So you work in the biological system to look at an approach. So this is derived from castor oil, which we drink, at least we used to drink for colds and coughs in the past. You can develop a polymer from that. They also have looked at the technical system and developed a product called Networks that is essentially developed from waste fishing nets, working closely with communities. What we've also had over the last sort of 15 to 20 years is the evolution of standards. We had around the early 2000s ISO TR 1462. It included a bit of management and a bit of design of eco-design. But then we've had IEC 62430, which is a specific standard for the electronic sector, which now is being further developed in a joint working group between ISO and IEC, are called 62959. Sorry, all these numbers, but this will be a standard that is a standard that's in development, which is aimed at all companies and all products. And essentially, it's aimed at the designer in terms of providing guidance to the designer on how to do eco-design. Guidance standard, not for certification. What we also have is ISO 14006, which I, fortunately or not, was the chairman of, and may well be taking that role again up as we go into the revision of this. This essentially is a standard that provides guidance on how to integrate eco-design into management systems, particularly EMS. And also quite a big breakthrough, bearing in mind, and I don't have the numbers to hand, but there's maybe 300,000 or something companies that have ISO 14001. There was addition now in the new version in 2005 on life cycle, essentially giving indication that companies who were progressing this really needed to. They didn't use the word eco-design, but it's implying it, and we managed to get ISO 14006 in the bibliographic references there. So so that's So again, 20 years, we're starting to see this get slowly into standardization. The next question is, are they being used? I don't know. There are tools being developed within companies that they're using and customizing. There are many, many, many tools, as we heard before, out there. The big question, from also my experience on the ground, how many companies, particularly SMEs, are actually using them? It's a challenge. A lot of the SMEs need one-to-one support, in my personal experience. So we're seeing a lot of discussion around new business models. What have I got to on here? So, I'm on new business models even. So again, we see flavours, and changes. A lot of, essentially, what is now being discussed under green business models was discussed in the early 2000s under sustainable product service system. So we get a rearrangement of the deck chairs again. We've seen companies, however, recognising that to deliver design for remanufacturing, as Xerox and many of the photocopier companies, they need to re-engineer the whole business model. So they effectively need to put in, recycling factories to take back the products. And they claim that they get 7 lives out of those initial platforms and lower materials and CO2 reduction per lifetime of the product. But essentially, it's not a design problem. It's a business model problem, and therefore it's a strategic investment. We have other companies, and I'm going to try and speed up here to hit my time, Chair. Other companies, particularly ICT platforms, starting to emerge. eBay, Patagonia set up a platform to try and encourage people to repair clothing. We've seen a really interesting company coming out of California, iFixit, who basically provide good quality tutorials to show you how to fix your product, and then they sell you the tools and the spares, and that's where the business model comes. But it says that people are getting more confident to try and repair their products. And I'll come back to something on that I've got a direct experience of. So people are getting a bit more confident, either more confident or they're getting pissed off with products breaking down. This whole issue of built-in products obsolescence that could not be talked about 5 years ago is now being talked about. And this is quite controversial, particularly for a number of big players. We have also other platforms. We've seen, over the last 20 years, we've seen, hybrid cars through to sexy electric vehicles, right through to now car sharing schemes. So we're seeing, things shifting. Body Shop, green niche company, bought by L'Oreal. Ecover, the first time buying another green niche company, buying Method, what I call a funky green company, a new young company with lots of creativity and energy that's really going out there. Ecover, as a mature green brand, bought that creativity, energy to liven the brand. But essentially what we've seen is a lot of the stuff over the last 20, 25 years has been redesigned and incremental improvements. We've seen some new business models. We've seen some sort of changing shifts, but we really haven't seen significant, real significant changes. And the other dimension, if we're talking truly sustainability in products, is still the social dimension is missing in this. We're still really talking about eco-design or eco-innovation rather than sustainable innovation, sustainable design. So looking into the future, we've become a lot more globalized, obviously, much more interconnected, things moving a lot quicker all the time, messages in, information out, facilitated by ICT, technology permeating into our lives every day, more and more, and it will continue. From iPads now to wearable clothes. We're seeing ICT facilitating that interconnection, that desire of people to communicate and share. 1/8 of the world is on Facebook. And if that's not a disruptive innovation, I don't know what it is. In the 10 to 15 years that it's existed, and it's only that, so this whole connection thing going on, collaborative consumption, the sharing economy, the emergence of what I'm calling these funky green companies. Companies are getting more sustainably hardwired into their DNA. They want a good business, but they want to do it in a different way. So this is an ex-merchant banker. She's identified that she could make bags from fire hoses. She now made this. It's called Elvis and Crest. They sell it to Harrods, the top store in London. So essentially it's a waste product. But now it's got some sort of aesthetic to it, and a design aesthetic. We're also seeing now companies taking on the challenges of big global challenges. So one of the big global challenges now that's increasingly emerging is ocean plastic waste. So just again checking that it is the right one. So and I've lost a minute by that. So I've been told two and a half minutes. So tackling big global changes. So basically, you've seen a company called Burio. I won't go into the detail of it, but essentially they're making skateboards out of plastic waste or from fishing nets, being sold around the world. Interface 4, Method, they're developing packaging from ocean plastic waste. That's a project that we're involved in that I'm not going to go into detail. That's all around this whole issue. But lastly, I think a shift that I'm seeing is going to split in two. So we're maybe moving into this new industrial paradigm where some people are talking about Industry 4.0, this whole idea of smart factories, smart supply chains, the Internet of Things, more and more interconnection, even smart cities. And even cities becoming, imaginarians, if you like, for new sustainable solutions because they have the access to the capital, the access to the networks of people. So they can become key platforms because of that proximity to new solutions. But the bit that I believe most people are not picking up is something I'm calling industrialization, reindustrialization 1.0. It's about decentralization, potentially about low carbon and more separate solutions. This is emergence of a new making, modifying, and fixing culture that is something about is grassroots. It's from civil society, and it's about doing stuff. Again, post-2008, being facilitated by massive access to information, and importantly, I've only started to separate this out, massive access to visual information on YouTube. If you really want to see something and make something, you can go and find it now. Web 2.0, and again, I will be there in 2 minutes, Chair. A massive access to information through the web and sharing. Open sourcing of designs now happening, and releasing of IP by major companies like Nike around green innovation. 3D printing and additive manufacturing, tools that are now being networked. New open innovation approaches, people starting to collaborate in different ways through hackathons, jams, etc., coming together in very different ways. Access to funding. 2008, nobody could get any funding. Crowdfunding now exists. This is Flow Hive. They produce basically honey from a hive. You can tap it. They raised 12.4 million in something like 17,000 over their target. So you can do it now. If you've got the motivation and the drive, you've got the tools now. And importantly, the last thing I think I'll mention is what I'm told is places. Places where people can come together to collaborate, share knowledge in fab labs, in maker spaces, and repair cafes. That's just a repair cafe that I run. And just in finishing, so will the transformation, are at a point of transition or transformation or transition, and will it be revolution or evolution? There's a small difference between revolution and evolution there sometimes. And is it going to come top down or bottom up? Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.